Watchers of Stillwater Lake. They never let you leave. It was supposed to be a peaceful getaway, the kind you take to escape the noise of the city and recharge. My friends and I had rented a cabin near an isolated lake deep in the woods. The listing online promised quiet, nature, and plenty of space to breathe. The place was called Stillwater Lake, a poetic name, we thought, for what we hoped would be a serene weekend. There were 5 of us: me, my best friend Jason, his girlfriend Claire, my college roommate Lily, and her younger brother Ethan. We were all looking forward to disconnecting for a few days, trading our phones for campfires and card games. None of us knew much about the area, but the pictures looked perfect. A cozy cabin on a quiet lake surrounded by towering pines. What could go wrong? The first thing I noticed when we arrived was the quiet, not the peaceful kind, but the unnatural, oppressive kind. No birds chirped, no rustling leaves. Even the lake was still, its surface like glass. It was beautiful, but something about it put me on edge. I brushed it off as my imagination. We'd been driving for hours and I was just tired. The cabin itself was old but well kept, with creaky wooden floors and a big stone fireplace. From the porch, you could see the lake stretching out into the trees, a perfect mirror of the overcast sky. The air smelled of damp earth and pine needles, and for a moment I let myself relax. That first night was uneventful. We lit a fire, roasted marshmallows, and laughed as Ethan told ridiculous ghost stories. Jason and Claire stayed up late drinking on the porch while the rest of us went to bed. I fell asleep easily, the quiet outside now a welcome change from the city's constant noise. But then I woke up. At first I wasn't sure what had stirred me. The room was dark and the cabin was silent. Then I heard it, a faint rhythmic sound like someone gently tapping on the window. I froze, my heart racing. The window was just a few feet from my bed, its thin curtains doing little to block the moonlight. I couldn't see anything, but the tapping continued, steady and deliberate. I told myself it was a branch. Maybe the wind had picked up. Gathering my courage, I crept to the window and peeked through the curtains. There was nothing there. The yard was empty, the lake beyond still as death. I closed the curtains and went back to bed, telling myself I'd imagined it. The next morning, I mentioned the sound to Jason while we made coffee. He shrugged. Probably just the wind. These old cabins make all kinds of noises. But as the day went on, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The woods felt darker, the air heavier. We decided to hike to the far side of the lake, where an old dock jutted out into the water. The trail was overgrown, and the silence followed us, broken only by our footsteps and the occasional snap of a twig. When we reached the dock, the air seemed colder. The wooden planks were warped and rotting, creaking under our weight. At the end of the dock, Jason found an old weathered sign covered in moss. He wiped it clean, revealing faded words carved into the wood. "Beware the watchers." "Creepy," Claire said with a nervous laugh. "It's probably just some local legend," Jason replied. "You know how these small towns are." But the warning stuck with me. That night, as we sat around the fire, I kept glancing at the lake. Its surface was so still it looked frozen, reflecting the stars above. For a moment, I thought I saw movement on the far shore, a shadow slipping between the trees. I stared, but it was gone. That was when the whispers started. At first, they were faint, just on the edge of hearing. I thought it was the wind, but as the night wore on, they grew louder. It wasn't words exactly, but a low, overlapping murmur, like 100 voices speaking all at once. I looked at the others, expecting them to react, but no one else seemed to notice. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, Claire refused to go swimming, insisting she'd felt something grab her ankle when she waded into the lake. "It was probably just weeds," Jason said, but I could see the fear in her eyes. Later, Ethan and I went back to the dock to take pictures. The air was colder again, and the lake seemed darker, its surface no longer reflective. As Ethan set up his camera, I noticed something strange: muddy footprints leading from the water onto the dock. They were large and uneven, like someone dragging their feet. I followed them to the end of the dock, where they disappeared into the lake. "Do you see this?" I asked Ethan, but he was staring out at the water, his face pale. "There's someone out there," he whispered. I followed his gaze and saw it, a figure standing waist-deep in the lake. It was too far away to make out details, but it wasn't moving. It just stood there facing us. We ran back to the cabin, our laughter and bravado gone. That night, the whispers returned, louder than before. They seemed to come from the walls, the floor, even the lake outside. I lay awake, clutching the blankets, listening to the voices grow and fade. Around midnight, I heard footsteps on the porch. Heavy, deliberate steps, like someone pacing back and forth. I woke Jason, but when we opened the door, the porch was empty. The footsteps continued, moving around the side of the cabin, but no one was there. The next day, the storm rolled in. The rain was relentless, and the road out of the woods was impassable. We were trapped. That night, the whispers became screams. The cabin shook, the lights flickered, and the air was filled with an unbearable pressure, like the entire building was about to collapse. Through the window, I saw them, the Watchers. Dozens of shadowy figures standing at the edge of the lake, their faces featureless and dark. They didn't move, but their presence was suffocating. Ethan was the first to break. He ran out into the storm, screaming that he couldn't take it anymore. We tried to stop him, but he was too fast. Moments later, the whispers stopped. When we found him, he was standing at the dock, staring into the lake. His expression was blank, his eyes wide and unseeing. He didn't respond when we called his name. Then, without a sound, he stepped off the dock and disappeared beneath the water. I don't remember how we escaped. The next thing I knew, I was in my car, driving away as fast as I could. The others were gone. Now, weeks later, the whispers have followed me. I hear them in the quiet moments, faint and distant, but always there. And sometimes when I look out my window at night, I see them, the Watchers, waiting at the edge of the shadows.